Okay, this time I'm looking at parallax scrolling. It's an old computer gaming technique, but anyhow, I'll get into the details later. To do this one, you really need to focus on getting your layers right because it's not just having a midground, foreground, midground, background, but how many times they're going to loop. So the numbers here are actually wrong. It should be double that. So the foreground's going to loop 8 times. The midground's also, actually 4 times. The midground's going to loop twice, and the background's going to loop once. So that as things progress in the screen, the hills in the distance just move a little bit. Anyhow, setting this up in Adobe Animate. Just going to give it a name, save it, and come on. So drawing this sort of scene stuff, it's actually going to be really, really easy. It's drawing with the blob brush and splattering stuff on the page. Come on. There's two techniques you can use at this point. I've just gone with the easy one, which is just splattering colours all over the place. Colour it all in, fill it, done. Now, when I do this, I'm making sure I actually use the selection tool to select something just slightly larger than the stage, because that way I only keep that piece. The other technique that I was talking about is that you can actually just draw a box and then colour over the top of it, making sure you don't go too far. Now here I'm adding the midground kind of thing, drawing around the edges, and you don't have to be that precise with it. But yeah, fill it all in, fill, done. Again, just slightly larger than the stage. If you find any mistakes in this sort of stuff, you can easily just go into the symbol and edit it to tidy it up, as I discover here that needs a little bit extra. So, moving on to the final one, the background layer, and I've done all these in reverse order for some reason, but anyhow. Hills in the distance. Now, when you do stuff, and that's some sort of random glitch that flew up the screen there, when you do stuff like this, as you look at stuff further into the distance, you're going to get that color transition from, I suppose, more desaturated colors and a slight tint of blue. And that way you can sort of communicate that idea of distance and the haziness of distance. So once all that's done, you've got your three symbols, you stack them up on your layers, and you set up your timeline. Excuse me. And, it's the same sort of thing, 3 layers, 3 symbols, animate them all individually, space them up to give the indication of distance. And come on, I need to zoom this out a little bit. I stuff around with adjusting the timeline, go 12 seconds, no, I'll stick with 30. And I want to animate it up to 120 frames. The reason for this is that each cycle will be a second for the foreground, because it's got to go through a lot of times. Whereas the other ones are different things. Now, what I'm doing at this point is I'm actually using a trick in Adobe Animate, because it will do maths for me, and I know the size of the stage is 1920. That's the width. So what I'm doing is I'm just adding another copy of that same symbol, 1920 over, and that way it fills out the space. Now, if I do the background first, and hopefully I do, yes I do, motion tween it, and just get it to slide over 1. Now, I don't want to guess this, so I'm just going to adjust that number by 1920, or just delete the first 3 characters, or adjust them down to 12.3. And that way, it should do a single cycle. Check it. Oh, it didn't move. I made a mistake somewhere. I think I forgot to adjust it. No, I didn't set the start point, maybe. So, adjust it over, slide it, check the number, go, is that about right? Not quite. So, best approximation. And that's the first one done, the first layer set up. So I should, at this point, start dealing with the next one. And it's the same technique. But in this case, because I've got to cycle it another couple of times, I'm going to double the previous one, slide that over, set it up. Now, when I do this, I need to add it to 1920 twice. So I think I type 1920 plus 1920, go enter, and it does the calculation for me. This is nice. It sort of makes life a little bit easier. Excuse me. And so again, motion tween, okay, slide that whole layer across, go to the end of it here, frame 120, and slide it across a huge distance. Now here it's currently set to 0x, we need to move it a bit. So it's 4 times 1920. The star is the 19. Now I've gone the wrong direction, it should have been minus, so I just whack a minus sign on the front, done. So here's some tricky sort of computer maths, although it's doing the hard work for you, which is great. So second layer is done. Now the foreground, I decided to tackle a different way because I don't want to create 4 symbols all the way out to the edge, because I know Adobe Animate has a limit of how far it can do stuff, a maximum size, let's say. So just focusing in on this piece, what I'm really looking at is, okay, well, I need to cycle once from frame 1 to 31. So I'm going to whack in a keyframe, and it's going to copy everything, and then frame 61, do the same. Because what I'm doing here is I'm going to have, I suppose, 4 cycles of the same trick happening. So on the first one, motion tween it, okay, and then frame, just slide it across 1920, so select it, it's at -4, so we just add 1920, or minus in this case. Yep, that all works. Okay, motion tween it again. Okay, and then paste in, select it first, select off, select onto it, select in the X coordinate of it, paste in the number. I'm going to copy that number with a Control C, and then set up my motion tween, go OK, do that final point of the transition, select off, select on, and select in the X and paste in my number. And that way I can copy that same attribute across multiple frames. Go to the very end of the timeline and select on, select off, paste, done. And so here at this point, I'm really hoping we can see it. What you've got is that front layer really just sort of scooting along at a high speed. And I'll add some sky in. Come on, hit play, I want to see what happens. So the foreground should be moving slightly faster than the other layers, although I may not have quite got it right. But the idea is there. So you want your sort of sky being fairly static, your mountain range being sliding over at a fairly slow pace, the mid-ground coming in fairly quickly, and then the foreground sort of zooming past as the character runs along. Great for a run cycle and that sort of stuff. But save it, we're done.